Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Gopi Jalabha Giri Baladari.
Jaya Gopi Jalabha Girivaradhari.
Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana.
Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana.
Yamunatira Vanachari.
Yamunatira Vanachari.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare. Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya
Divine Grace, AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki. Shambhena Bhaktivedanta ki. Gaur Pregnant. All glories to Someone. All glories. All glories to Someone. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanitam Hamsajivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishkamritam Sha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Govesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Dapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpanayubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I got the message that your verse that you're working on today is 8, chapter verse 28. Is that correct? I hope it is. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I'm off to the right step, at least for the beginning here. Thank you all for your welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to speak to all of you. So we are looking at Bhagavad Gita here, trying to understand what Krishna is saying to us. And Srila Prabhupada has also given us his purports. And we'll start off by doing the Sanskrit. Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva.
Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva.
Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva.
Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva.
Daneshu yapunya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yapunya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yapunya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yapunya phalam pradishtham.
Adyeti tat sarvam idam viditva.
Adyeti sarvam idam viditva.
Adyeti tat sarvam idam viditva.
Adyeti tat sarvam idam viditva.
Yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam.
Yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam.
Yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam.
Yogi Paramsthanupayati Charyam.
Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Adyeti tat sarvam idam viditva.
Adyeti tat sarvam idam viditva.
Yogi param sthanam upayati chadyam.
Yogi Paramsthanupayati Charyam.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Tat sarvam idam viditva.
Adyeta sarvam idam viditva.
Yogi paramsthanupayati
Yogi Paramsthanupayati
charyam.
Charyam.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapashu chaiva.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Atyeti tat sarvamidam viditva.
Adyeti tat sarvamidam viditva.
Yogi paramsthanamupayati chadyam.
Yogi Paramsthanupayati Charyam.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Atyeti tat sarvamidam viditva.
Adyeti tat sarvamidam viditva.
Yogi paramsthanupayati chadyam.
Yogi Paramsthanupayati Charyam.
Vaishnavis.
Vedeshu yagneshu tapashu chaiva.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Atyeti tat sarvamidam viditva.
Adyeti tat sarvamidam viditva.
Yogi paramsthanamupayati chadyam.
Yogi Paramsthanupayati Charyam.
Vedeshu yagneshu tapashu chaiva.
Vedeshu yajneshu tapasu chaiva.
Daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham.
Adyeti tat sarvamidam viditva. Yogi Paramsthanupayati Charyam.
Vedeshu.
Vedeshu.
In the study of the Vedas.
In the study of the Vedas.
Yagyeshu.
Yajneshu.
In the performance of yajna sacrifice.
In the performance of yajna sacrifice.
Tapasu.
Tapasu.
In undergoing different types of austerities.
And undergoing different types of austerities.
Cha.
Cha.
Also.
Also.
Eva.
Eva.
Certainly.
Certainly.
Daneshu.
Daneshu.
In giving charity.
In giving charities.
Yat.
Yat.
That which.
That which.
Punya phalam.
Punya phalam.
Result of pious work.
Result of pious work.
Pradishtam.
Pradishtam.
Indicated.
Indicated.
Adyeti.
Adyeti.
Surpasses.
Surpasses.
Tatsarvam.
Tat sarvam.
All those.
All those.
Idam.
Idam.
This.
This.
Viditva.
Viditva.
Knowing.
Knowing.
Yogi.
Yogi.
The devotee.
The devotee.
Param.
Param.
Supreme.
Supreme.
Sthanam.
Sthanam.
Abode.
Abode.
Upayati.
Upayati.
Achieve.
Achieve.
Cha.
Cha.
Also.
Also.
Adyam.
Adyam.
Original.
Original.
So here is the translation of the verse. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply, by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. So, I say it, and you all please repeat. A person who accepts the path
A person who accepts the path
of devotional service
of devotional service
is not bereft
is not bereft
of the results derived
of the results derived
from studying the Vedas,
from studying the Vedas,
performing austere sacrifices,
performing austere sacrifices,
giving charity,
giving charity,
or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities.
or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities.
Simply by performing devotional service,
Simply by performing devotional service,
he attains all these,
he attains all these,
and at the end,
and at the end,
he reaches the supreme eternal abode.
he reaches the supreme eternal abode.
So here's the prophet's purport. This verse is a summation of the 7th and 8th chapters, which particularly deal with Krishna consciousness and devotional service. One has to study the Vedas under the guidance of the spiritual master and undergo many austerities and penances while living under his care. A brahmachari has to live in the home of the spiritual master just like a servant. He must beg alms from door to door and bring them to the spiritual master. He takes food only under the master's order. And if the master neglects to call the student for food that day, the student fasts. These are some of the Vedic principles for observing brahmacharya. After the student studies the Vedas after the student studies the Vedas under the master for a period from 5 to 20 years, he may become a man of perfect character. Study of the Vedas is not meant for the recreation of armchair speculators, but for the formation of character. After this training, the brahmachari is allowed to enter into household life and marry. When he is a householder, he has to perform many sacrifices so that he may achieve further enlightenment. He must also give charity according to country, time, and candidate, discriminating among charity in goodness, in passion, and in ignorance, as described in Bhagavad Gita. Then, after retiring from household life, upon accepting the order of Vanaprastha, he undergoes severe penances, living in the forests, dressing with tree bark, not shaving, etc. By carrying out the orders of brahmacharya, household life, vanaprastha, and finally sannyas, one becomes elevated to the perfectional stage of life. Some are then elevated to the heavenly kingdoms, and when they become even more advanced, they are liberated in the spiritual sky, either in the impersonal Brahmajyoti or in the Vaikuntha planets or Krishna Loka. This is the path outlined by the Vedic literatures. The beauty of Krishna consciousness, however, is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, one can surpass all the rituals of different orders of life. The word idam viditva indicates that one should understand the instructions given by Sri Krishna. In this chapter, the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and in this chapter and in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, one should try to understand these chapters not by scholarship or mental speculation, but by hearing them in association with devotees. Chapters 7 through 12 are the essence of Bhagavad Gita. The first 6 and last 6 chapters are like the coverings for the middle 6 chapters, which are especially protected by the Lord. If one is fortunate enough to understand Bhagavad Gita, especially these middle 6 chapters, in the association of the devotees, then his life at once becomes glorified beyond all penances, sacrifices, charities, speculations, etc. For one can achieve all results of these activities simply by Krishna consciousness. One who has a little faith in Bhagavad Gita should learn Bhagavad Gita from a devotee. Because in the beginning of the 4th chapter it is stated clearly that Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees. No one else can perfectly understand the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. One should therefore learn Bhagavad Gita from a devotee of Krishna, not from a mental speculator. This is a sign of faith. When one searches for a devotee and finally gets a devotee's association, one actually begins to study and understand Bhagavad Gita. By advancement in the association of the devotee, one is placed in devotional service. And this service dispels all of one's misgivings about Krishna or God and Krishna's activities, forms, pastimes, names, and other features. After these misgivings have been perfectly cleared away, one becomes fixed in one's study. Then one relishes the study of Bhagavad Gita and attains the state of feeling always Krishna conscious. In the advanced stage, one falls completely in love with Krishna. This highest perfectional stage of life enables the devotee to be transferred to Krishna's abode in the spiritual sky, Goloka Vrindavan, where the devotee becomes eternally happy. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of attaining the Supreme. Vedeshu yogyeshu tapasu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam adyeti tatsarvam idam viditva yogi paramsthana upaiti chadyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activity. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. Some of you may know that Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 sections. So these 3 sections are the first 6 chapters, the second 6 chapters, and the third 6 chapters. Wow, that's a tough one, right? So it's like a cake, and if you cut it into 3 exact same size pieces. First 6, middle 6, third 6. So the middle 6, as Prabhupada explains in his purport, are sometimes called the heart of the Gita. So in the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is trying to explain to Arjuna various different Vedic processes. So there are different ways of purification, and the Vedas have many different paths or processes that we can use for purification. But at the end of the 6th chapter, Krishna does not say, okay, Arjuna, then whichever one you like the most, you do that. Instead, he tells Arjuna, you should become a yogi. So, he says the yogi is better than the tapasvi, he's better than the jnani, he's better than the karmi. So, my dear Arjuna, you become a yogi. So, why didn't Arjuna then do yoga? We don't find that the battle of Kurukshetra started and Arjuna was in the lotus padmasana and meditating. It would seem correct if Arjuna did what Krishna said. Arjuna is being asked to be a yogi. But that's not the kind of yogi that Krishna asked him to be. We find instead that Krishna is asking Arjuna to be a certain kind of yogi, not the meditating yogi, but rather Madgatenantaratmana, a yogi that always meditates on Krishna, not in the lotus Padmasana, but actually in service. So that's where the first 6 chapters comes to an end. Krishna described the path of karma. He's talked about Buddhi Yoga. He's talked about Jnana. He's talked about Astanga Yoga. He's talked about all those things. But at the end of it, he says, my dear Arjuna, you please become a yogi. And then he says, of all those yogis, one who always thinks of me, his mind intent on me, worshiping me in trance and loving service. He is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So this kind of yogi who serves but thinks of Krishna is what we call a bhakti yogi, not a Astanga yogi, but a bhakti yogi. So bhakti yoga is yoga that means that a person dedicates their life to Krishna, not to meditation or to living austerely. He dedicates his life to serving Krishna. So now, when we begin chapter 7, at that point, we are in the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. So the middle 6 chapters, we said, this is about what it means to actually do bhakti yoga. So Krishna has not explained bhakti yoga in the first 6 chapters. He explains it in the middle 6 chapters. So in the first 6 chapters, Krishna tells Arjuna, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, but what I want you to do is be a bhakti yogi. So in the middle 6 chapters, he explains what a bhakti yogi is. And this first verse in the 7th chapter, we find that it explains that how one can know Krishna without doubt. Asamshaya samagramam. How one can understand Krishna without doubt. So in this first verse of chapter 7, we learn that the bhakti yogi, he does certain things and he doesn't do other things. We learn that there are 4 kinds of pious people. We learn that there are 4 kinds of impious people. We learn that there is demigod worship, but Krishna doesn't recommend it. He recommends something else. He recommends doing bhakti yoga. So these are things mentioned in chapter 7. So Krishna is now explaining what bhakti yoga really is. And Arjuna asks an important question at the end of chapter 7, which is, or rather, Krishna uses some terms at the end of chapter 7. And using these terms, Arjuna wants to know the meaning of these terms. So in the beginning of chapter 8, Arjuna asks 8 questions with 5 terms and 3 other questions. So 3 plus 5 equals 8. And he asks, Kim tad Brahma, Kim Adhyatma. So he asks, what is Brahman? What is Adhyatma, the self? What is karma? What are, a few other things? He asks about 5 different items. And then he asks, who is Adi Yagya, the Lord of Sacrifice? Where does he live? And how can one connect. So these are the 8 questions that Arjuna asks. These are the beginning of chapter 6. And Krishna answers all those questions in a very simple, straightforward way. And then he begins to explain more about what bhakti is, what a bhakta yogi does. So he explains that. And in this way, we begin to get a clear picture of what Krishna is actually asking Arjuna to do. We find out about how the various processes in the Vedas are given, but there is one process that's more important than all those processes. So as we've been saying, that process is Bhakti Yoga. We said that at the end of chapter 6, that's where Krishna tells Arjuna he wants him to be a Bhakti Yogi. And at the end of chapter 8, he explains, don't worry, if you become a Bhakti Yogi, you won't miss out. What won't you miss out on? Well, we've just read, that if you've read the Vedas, as some people do, they spend time studying the Vedas, you won't miss out by becoming a Bhakti Yogi. If you are doing various austere sacrifices, you won't miss out. If you are giving charity, you won't miss out. If you are doing various kinds of good karma or various activities, performing various yajnas for good things, you won't miss out. And in fact, you will get all those same results. How? Just by performing devotional service. So if you perform devotional service, as Prabhupada says, with one stroke, you have accomplished everything else. You don't need to do any of those other things. So by doing devotional service, you have accomplished everything else. And therefore, don't worry, Arjuna, that you need to do some meditation besides this, that you need to perform some yajna besides this, that you need to worship some demigods or any of these other things. You don't have to worry about any of that. Just do devotional service. Krishna will again make the same point in the 18th chapter, where he says, Sarva dharma prityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma shucha. That don't worry about these other varieties of religion. Just do devotional service, and I will deliver you from all sin. So in chapter 8 here, at the very end, this verse that we're discussing today, 8:28, he says, don't worry, Arjuna, that you will get all the good stuff from doing all the other things. And in chapter 18, he says, don't worry, Arjuna, all the bad stuff won't harm you because you've done Bhakti Yoga. So chapter 6, the end, he says, please, Arjuna, you do Bhakti Yoga. In chapter 8, he says, don't worry, Arjuna, at the very end, whatever you might have gotten by doing any of the other processes, by giving in charity, by austerity, by studying the Vedas, by performing fruitive activities, all those things, you will get the same thing by doing Bhakti Yoga. And in chapter 18, Krishna says, whatever bad things you might have done or whatever bad karma, don't worry about it. Just by doing Bhakti Yoga, everything will be taken care of. So we see that Bhakti Yoga is the one-stop shop for all of processes of spiritual life. There are many things that you could buy in the store, but Bhakti Yoga is the one-stop shop. You can do that, and everything will work out. However, Prabhupada says, if you do those other things, you may not get the ultimate goal. If you just perform austerities, if you just worship demigods, if you just do fruitive activities, you will not necessarily get the result of everything. So this is kind of a good verse for understanding this basic principle. And it brings us to a concept that is very important in the Bhagavad Gita, and that concept is called the yoga ladder. So some of you may have heard about the yoga ladder, and that means that there are levels of purification. At the bottom level of purification is what we affectionately call Dvipada Pashu, two-legged animal life. So we have humans, but they're living like the four-legged. So the four-leggeds, they eat, sleep, mate, and defend. And we see that some humans, all they do is eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Of course, they do a lot of work usually too. They have to hold down a job, so you need that to be able to defend and mate nicely, and also to eat, right? So you need that. So you have four-legged animal life. But above that is what's known as karma kanda. So that's better than animal life. So karma kanda means that I have realized that if I just eat, sleep, mate, and defend, I will be racking up bad karma. So I don't want to rack up bad karma. So I will do some Vedic sacrifices to get rid of my bad karma. I'll do some prayaschitta or something like that. So that is karma kanda. Now, better than that, the next step up is what's called karma yoga. So how is karma yoga different from karma kanda? Well, in karma yoga, now we are doing things to please the Supreme, at least to some extent. However, in karma yoga, the goal is still material happiness. So we are pleasing the Supreme. We are not just doing pious work, because pious work is explained in the Vedas as giving us an opportunity to enjoy more and to get rid of our past karma. But now we are doing it to please the Supreme. However, we are pleasing the Supreme so the Supreme will please us. That's our real goal. I call this God is my waitress attitude, that we are pleasing God, but we are making our Christmas list or our choosing from the menu. This is, okay, God, I'm doing all these things for you, various rituals, but now pay attention to what I have on my list. So this is karma yoga. Above karma yoga is jnana. Now, jnana is the first stage where we come to the understanding that material happiness is not going to really ever work. I know, I hate to break it to you, if you have thought maybe it will work. Most people do. It's on all the billboards. If you drive down the highway, 19 or whatever it is you're driving, you'll see billboards that tell you how to achieve material happiness. You can go to some gambling casino down there in Atlantic City, or you can enjoy a car, a particular one, that is most nice, or you can buy the latest iPhone or other Qualcomm miracle that has come to us in some, dazzling way from our friends in Silicon Valley. So all these things can be the things that we are pointed at for material happiness. However, somehow or other, material happiness never quite satisfies us. We feel hollow and empty. We find that we are doing more and more things to be materially happy, and we're not becoming happy. We're becoming jaded. We're becoming bored. We're becoming frustrated, because a lot of times when you try to become materially happy, the best way to become miserable is to try to become materially happy. It's the quickest way to become miserable. It doesn't make sense, but that's the way it works, you know. That's the crazy thing about it. You know, I always say that when we're born as babies, we come out of the womb, and we learn that we like some things taste nice, smell nice, feel nice, sound nice, and other things don't taste nice, they don't feel nice, they don't sound nice. We want to get rid of them. So we end up collecting things we like the taste of, smell of, et cetera, et cetera. We wind up trying to build walls and various kinds of barriers for things that don't feel nice, don't smell nice, et cetera, et cetera. And we assume this is what life is all about. And why should we think anything else? Everybody else thinks that, you know. People we work with, mostly, usually, even many times our parents think like that. Many times our relatives think like that. The people at work think like that. Everywhere we see people on television, people on the internet, they all think like that we want more things that we like the taste of, smell of, the look of, et cetera, et cetera. We want to get rid of those things that we don't like the taste of, smell of, look of, et cetera. And so we spend our whole lives doing that. But it doesn't work. We just become bored, jaded, we become frustrated. However, if somebody says, actually, if you want to be happy, you try to learn to serve God. Now, this doesn't seem likely at all. This seems kind of like a ridiculous possibility. Now, I'm supposed to be happy by trying to serve God. If I'm serving somebody else, how does that make me happy? Doesn't sound right. However, it works. So that's the bizarre thing, that if you do what seems to be the logical thing to do, to accumulate material happiness by various material means, you become miserable. However, if you try to serve God, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with your own happiness, you become happy. Strange but true, you know. I didn't make the rules, but that's the way it works, you know. So you're welcome to go the other route, you know. My condolences, my hats off. Good luck, you know. Didn't work for me, but maybe it'll work for you. So at any rate, this is the nature that we learn at the point where we become jnanis. We start to get this funny sense that material happiness isn't what it's cracked up to be. That it just, there's something about it that doesn't work. If it worked, why is it so hard to become happy? You know, why do you have to do so many things? Why does it seem to be always just outside our grasp? So at the jnani stage is the first point where we realize that material happiness is a lost cause. But we don't know what the right cause is. At the jnani stage, we're looking. So we read books, we go to groups, we learn, well, there are these people who think that, and those people who thought this, and there's those people over there that thought yet something else, and we try various processes, we try various things, and we don't know really what's the right thing. So that's higher up then the karmis, or the what we call the karma yogis, is higher up than the karma khandis, and certainly better than the two-legged animal platform, but it's still not there. Then above them, we have the actual Ashtanga yogis, who find out that, well, we don't have to know so many things, but if we do a physical practice, the practice of yoga, which has 8 limbs, yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, etc., etc. So these different stages of Hatha yoga, or not Hatha yoga, but Ashtanga yoga. By performing those, we come to a consciousness that's very different than everyday consciousness. The consciousness that's more satisfied. But still, this Ashtanga yoga is not the highest level. Above that is what we call bhakti, or devotional service, where we learn that there is a God, like we learned back in karma yoga, but now we learn that there is a God and we want to please him, but not so that he will turn around and please us. That's not the purpose for pleasing God. We're pleasing God to please God. Automatically we'll be pleased, but not because we have a Christmas shopping list that we want for God to do. We will be pleased because pleasing God is by its very nature pleasing to us as well, because we are a part of God. So that's the high point. So this is why Krishna has explained in the first 6 chapters these other things, about austerities. If you perform austerities, you will get some benedictions, you will get some Shakti, but it won't make you happy. And it won't connect you to God. And if you're not connected to God, that means that when you die, you get to do it all again. You get to do the wah-wah and, mommy's telling you, don't do that. And, you get to do that all again. And so if you perform Krishna consciousness, you go to the stage where you will eventually leave the cycle of reincarnation. You will become happy and you will go back to the spiritual world. So what's interesting in this 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is that here we have finally some little bit of prayojana. Krishna actually explains a little bit about that world where he lives. So we heard, first of all, in the very first part of Bhagavad Gita, Sambandha, where we learn that the material world is a nasty place. Arjuna's realized that. He's about to fight a battle. Fighting a battle is not the happiest endeavor that people usually do. So that's not nice. And then he learns in chapter 7 that there's bhakti yoga, what he needs to do, how to engage in bhakti yoga. Now in chapter 8, we're hearing a little bit of that supreme abode where he can go. So that's in chapter 8. So 3 concepts in the Vedic literature are Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. So Sambandha, as I put it, is knowing the fix that we're in. And Abhideya is the fix for the fix that we're in. And Prayojana is where will we be fixed when we fix the fix that we're in. So we will be fixed in the spiritual world. So Sambandha is again the fix that we're in, Abhideya, the fix for the fix, and Prayojana, where we'll be fixed when we fix the fix. So this is the nature of transcendental knowledge. And in this way, Prabhupada is trying to help us to understand that we need to know Bhagavad Gita not from a speculator, not from a jnani, not from a karmi, not from a demigod worshiper, not from a pundit, but from a devotee. Because then we'll understand Bhagavad Gita in its right perspective. We'll understand Bhakti Yoga, and we won't get sidetracked into karma or gyan or into any of these other things, which are all there in the Vedas, but Krishna's not recommending them. Rather, he's recommending one thing, and he's saying, whatever you do, if you do Bhakti Yoga, you will get that result, and better. You will go to the spiritual world. And in 18th chapter we find that whatever you're worried about that might be coming your way, don't worry about that, because I've taken care of that too. All right, so I'll end there. See if there are any questions or... yeah, let me take this question first.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for enlightening us, and it is very reassuring when you said to look for material happiness is a sure key for being miserable. So I have a question here, being or trying to be a devotee, and we are in devotional service, but still sometimes we face reversals in life. So how do you deal with such things, or
we face what in life?
Reversals?
Reversals, okay. Well, no one ever said it was going to be easy. We came to the material world, and there will be reverses, because the material world is designed to do two things, actually. There's a nice verse. It's in 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd chapter, 3rd verse. Abhir Bhutani Bhutatma Mahabhutara Mahabhuja Sasaracha Chavachaniyadya Swama Trapna Prasidati. So the verse is saying that the Supreme sent forth creatures in higher and lower species so that they can pursue either their matra or atma. So you can pursue your material gratification, or you can pursue your spiritual progress. Now, the interesting thing is that either one of those you pursue, you're going to face difficulties. There was a famous cartoon by a American author and humorist named James Thurber, where he has these two men standing at the bottom of a hill, and then there's a road going from the bottom of the hill up to the top of one hill, and a road from the bottom of the hill up to the top of a different hill. And the one hill at the very top says, "A meaningful life," and the sign at the top of the other hill says, "An indifferent existence." And the two men at the bottom are saying it's odd that both of them should be uphill. So whichever way, you're going to face adversity, because that's the way the material nature works. However, with Krishna consciousness, we get the sense that we are actually making progress out of the entanglement, and our karma is gradually getting better. If you go the other way, your karma gets darker and darker, and your problems just multiply. Still, one of the things that we learn, and we've been discussing lately in our Bhagavatam classes in Brooklyn, is that if a person hears Krishna Katha, it alleviates the miseries of material life, So just by hearing Krishna's pastimes, hearing the philosophy of Krishna, hearing the nature of how we are in this material world, it begins to alleviate. Taba katamritam tapta jivanam kavi vireditam kalma sapaham shravanam mangalam srimad atatam Bhuvi Grinanti Bhudi Dajanaha. This is the gopis explaining that your pastimes are very mangala, very auspicious, and they are the right, medicine or medication for those who are burning in the forest of material existence. And so this helps, by this. And so by hearing the pastimes, the philosophy, the nature of spiritual life, by hearing Bhagavatam, by chanting Hare Krishna, we are connecting with Krishna. And one of the main themes that Krishna is making in this part of Bhagavad Gita is always think of me. So if we think of Krishna, automatically that tends to pour a soothing medicine on whatever difficulties we have. And if you don't believe me, try it. Again, it doesn't seem reasonable, but it works. That just by hearing, just by reading, just by listening to a lecture, we find ourselves transported. Just by the sheer act. Okay. I think Murli Bhatta had a question.
That was a very nice question. I'm going to go further. Krishna's given us some hype. Krishna's giving us some hype here.
Yeah.
And it's not my opinion. Sukadeva Goswami, it was pointed out to Sukadeva Goswami by Maharaj Pariksit, it was even pointed out to Krishna by Yudhisthira. And here's the problem. Krishna's saying, when you do devotional service, you get the benefits of all these things. But we see practically that those who worship the demigods, they can also, especially Lord Shiva, they get all sorts of opulence.
Right.
And then those who become devotees, they're poor and bereft of everything.
Right.
So what's going on?
What's going on? Is this a false claim? Are we going to sue Krishna for false advertising? This is interesting because the key rests in what people are actually after. Why do people want opulence, wealth, good reputation, fame, all these things? Because they assume that happiness is brought with these things. It's a good assumption, but again, it's a wrong assumption. What we really want is happiness. We don't want these things. We want these things because they bring happiness. But when you worship Krishna, you may become impoverished. Prabhupada used to, what's that verse I'm trying to... Yasyaham anugranami harishe taddanam shanai. That when I show somebody my mercy, I take everything away. And that poor miserable person being abandoned by his family and relatives has no one to turn to but me. So this sounds like, if you really want to scare people away from Krishna, point them to this verse, And I think many people in India are deathly afraid of Krishna because they know that this could happen. So if we worship Shiva or one of the demigods, he doesn't say that, rather he's Ashutosh. He may give various material benedictions. However, when one gets material benedictions, the problem is we have to go back to the demigod and ask again, because material benedictions wear off. And then we're in the habit of constantly wanting material benedictions. And if we worship some demigods, but not others, the ones that aren't being worshipped may become angry that we didn't worship them too. So we're worshiping Indra or whichever one we're partial to. If we don't worship the other ones, they may get angry, and therefore we may get cursed by them. And so there's only 33 million. So if you really want to worship all the demigods, you have some work to do here to cover all the bases. And as we see that Krishna will fulfill our desires, but he will not do it in such a way that it will entangle us further. Akama savakamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether one has no material desires, akama, savakama va, or one has all material desires. So mostly everybody falls in one of those two classes. Or one desires liberation. That's a minor class. Not many people in that one. Moksha kama udaradi, or one wants liberation. In any case, Tivrena, one should worship the Supreme Lord. Because it's mentioned that if we worship Krishna, even for material desires, which is not pure devotion, that's back to the God is my waitress concept, but still, if we do that, we will discover that Krishna will remove the attachments to various material things, and we will find what actually makes us happy. What will actually make everybody happy is going back to the spiritual world, but we don't believe it and we can't relate to it right now. Rather, we think that the right kind of Subaru will do it, or maybe the right cell phone, or a flat screen of the appropriate proportions will do it for us, or becoming well known in some kind of circle will do it. But these things don't actually make anybody happy. If you want to know, then you can try them. I was recently talking to a friend of mine who is is a contractor. He owns and manages a commercial contracting company in Manhattan. And evidently, Jeff Bezos is building a huge thing on a skyscraper somewhere in Manhattan. And he decided that he wanted a special bed, which only cost like $300,000 or something like that. And because it was on the top of the skyscraper, they had to actually block off the street and put cranes to put the bed on this floor, wherever it was, for his thing. And so, since my friend sometimes contracts for Bezos and some of these other people, he was amazed at the amount of money thrown away on just a special kind of Swedish manufactured bed that does something amazing. I don't know what their qualities are, but somehow they're amazing. And then he said that he came back a few weeks later, noticed the cranes were back up. And so he was asking, well, what's going on? I thought they moved the bed up. And they said, well, they did. He didn't like it. So they were pulling it back down and giving him a different bed. So at any rate, you can see that people with huge amounts of money, this is the kind of thing they do with it. And does it actually make them happy? In the end, what people discover, that having a lot of money, the one thing that they actually enjoy out of having a lot of money is that other people envy them. That's the one thing that people actually get a happiness from by having a lot of money. Other people wish that they were like them. But actually having a whole bunch of cars, or having a skyscraper, or being able to go around the world in a yacht, these things seem like they would make you happy, but they really don't in a deep way. So if you pray to Krishna for these, Krishna may fulfill them or may not, but in any case, you will be happy. And if he does fulfill them, he will do it in such a way that you'll gradually come to realize that these things aren't worth having. So
Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on the Yashahaman Grinami verse, makes an interesting point in this regard. He says that Krishna may give his devotee happiness, but it's different than the happiness that the karmi gets, because the karmi's happiness will leave a residue or seed for more. But the happiness that Krishna gives, there won't be such a seed anymore.
yeah, eventually Krishna extinguishes the desire for material enjoyment. So Rishabdev makes that point. That let me let me ask this. There was someone here that wanted a question, right?
Thank you, Maharaj, for the class. Maharaj, the question is regarding the yoga ladder that you explained.
Uh-huh.
So till Karma Yoga, it makes sense to me. I'm just wondering, why is Jnana before Ashtanga Yoga? The reason I ask is because Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs, at least the first 4 limbs seems to be more physical in nature. But Jnana seems to be more at the subtle level. And also we know that Jnani is like the impersonalists like Shukadev Goswami and the 4 Kumaras were essentially Jnanis in the impersonalism perspective. So it seems like that Ashtanga should be prior to Jnana, but I'm just curious to hear why is that order?
Well, that's usually the order that they're given in. The yoga ladder is implicit in the Bhagavad Gita, but many commentators describe it. And the idea of Ashtanga Yoga is that one has a physical process for reaching the highest conclusion, whereas with Jnana, one is just using his mind, spinning the gears upstairs. That's all that's happening. You may or may not get any realization from that, any deeper realization. Usually, Jnanis are targeting what we consider the Brahman. So we Vedanti tattva pitas tattva mayajganam advayam brahmeti paramameti bhagavaniti shabdyate. So the Supreme is known in 3 aspects or 3 features, and that is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So the target of the Jnanis is usually impersonal Brahman. So the target of the yogis is usually the Paramatma, which is personal. So it's a higher level there. At least ostensibly, that is the target of the yogi. However, a yogi may be sidetracked either by instead also wanting to merge with Brahman. Some yogis do that. Or they may be sidetracked by mystic powers, the siddhis, which is often what attract the yogi's mind. So he gets neither Paramatma nor Brahman, but rather the yogi settles with some siddhis, and he comes and produces ashes or smiles in a very interesting way, or able to have a lot of followers, or those kind of things. So this is where, usually to at least be targeting the Paramatma is better than targeting Brahman, because Brahman has no features. There's nothing there. The Paramatma is not the full realization or relationship with the Supreme. Bhagavan is, but it's still better than Paramatma. That's how I would respond. Hare Krishna. There's someone over here that had a question, then probably we're drifting everybody. We're over time.
Yeah, so any
We're gonna
devotees have any questions, please
time
let
out.
me during Prasadam time.